I want to welcome all of you to a very elite session this morning. You have been invited into a very exclusive conversation this morning, but it's one that I have been very excited about for quite some time now, because we get to have a sit down with the director of DaySpring dance company, which I've heard so much about. And yeah, it's just a very inspiring, what we see there is very inspiring, and I think it's something we personally as a dance ministry and as a company is working towards. So we're very excited about that. And then also to have Tienie here, who has been a backbone of our own dance ministry for the last 6 years. So she will also be sharing some of the insights, some of the experiences, and some practical tips on when you want to start your own a dance ministry at your church, maybe a little bit more informal than what it would be like at DaySpring or when it feeds out of a studio. So I am going to pray for us, and then let's get into it. Jesus, we honor you this morning for experiences and for our varied experience, and that we can learn and learn from each other and share what we've learned, so that we don't have to make the same mistakes, or that that your body functions in that way. And this morning we come expectant also to learn just structures and processes and things that you've put in place that would help us work towards the excellence that we dream of, or that we see in our hearts and our minds for your kingdom, Lord. I pray that from this session you would activate lots of people to start dance ministries, Lord, that dance would become a community that represents your body and who you are well, and that brings the healing and the glory and the life that you intended for your bride to have, or your body to have in this world. And so we want to ask you, Lord, that what we discuss would help studio owners or people who feel called to dance ministry when they watch this or when they've joined us. Lord, I pray that you would put visions in their hearts and dreams, and that this would give them like that first step, or the first few steps towards that. Thank you for what you are dreaming of for dance in South Africa and in this country, and that it's a redemptive tool in your hand, and a instrument of bringing a message in your kingdom, or drawing people towards your kingdom. So we honor you for who you are. Thank you that we are united because we know you, and we just want to glorify you and bring you lots of honor this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 So Katie, I almost wanted to ask you, what did you eat this morning? But what do you start your day with?
Granola.
No, I want to know, DaySpring dance. Tell us about, why did you call it DaySpring? Is there some significance behind the name? I would just like to really know that.
Okay, so the name DaySpring comes from a scripture that talks about Jesus being our DaySpring, and he's from on high. I think that Jesus is the one who brought a new dawn and a new era. You know, we talk about centuries as before Christ and after Christ. And so DaySpring was a new beginning for all the people that wanted to follow Jesus and embrace what he had to offer them. And DaySpring Dance Company is about spreading that light and telling people that truth, and bringing it to aspects of their lives, that it's for people who don't know Christ and for people who do know Christ, and to provide culturally relevant dance for Christians as well as non-Christians, because there's a lot out there in popular culture for non-Christians or secular contexts, but there's not a lot for Christians, and there's not a lot of clean entertainment or clean ministry things that are out there for people to watch, if that makes sense.
Sure. So like a new dawn, calling forth a new dawn. Okay, tell us, how did it start? What did you do to start it? Did God inspire? Did God give you a vision? How did it? Why did Katie start DaySpring?
Okay, this is a long story, and I'll try and make it short. So, when I was 16, I was living in Port Elizabeth, and I went to an audition for Joburg Art School and got in. And while I was at Johannesburg Art School, I had trouble because artistically I had a lot going for me, but physically I was tight. I didn't have good feet. I didn't have a good turnout, but I had the artistry that was there that carried me, and the creativity and the choreographic intent for what I was doing. And God spoke to me clearly about Christian arts ministry. Not particularly just dance, but just Christian arts ministry. And me being 16 thought, oh, Lord, how am I going to do it on my own? You're calling me to this. How am I going to do it on my own? Well, it took me a while to work out that, it's a team, and he brings people alongside. So over the years, I finished at art school. I had then went on to, I had a bit of a crisis in my matric year. I got glandular fever, and I actually didn't even end up doing my matric final exam. And it was a real time of reckoning and saying, well, Lord, if I'm not being to dance, where are you sending me? Mm-hmm. And when you have crisis, sometimes you forget what he told you in the times. And you, don't pull up in faith. I mean, in darkness, things that seeds you planted in faith. They're in the dark, they're busy germinating, you can't tell what they're doing. And so I applied to do occupational therapy and to do dance at UCT, and I didn't get in for occupational therapy, of course, and I got in for dance, and then spent 3 years there. And the year after that, I ended up staying in Cape Town and dancing for the first time in Christian dance ministry with Christlight Dance Company. I don't know if you've ever heard of Christlight, and Rosie Raw. And she was the pioneer of Christian dance in South Africa. She was the original founder of the Christian Dance Fellowship of South Africa. And so I danced with Christlight and learned about how to be in a dance ministry. And she had a very strong ballet base, so a lot of what she did was based from that. And then in about the June, we went to Grahamstown because the Christian Dance Fellowship had a conference. And while we were there, I ended up, Christlight was supposed to stay on, and I ended up staying there a bit longer. But one of the girls, Sue Hodson, I don't know if you know Sue Hodson at all. She's based in Cape Town. She injured her ankle, and so we couldn't stay on. We were supposed to do ministry at the Arts Festival. And the Lord spoke to me. I had to stay behind because I was going off to Johannesburg, to Vanderbijl Park to meet my boyfriend at the time, who I then got engaged to and married. But I had to wait 3 days, and I had nothing to do in that time because we were supposed to be performing, and I was getting a lift of someone else. And the Lord really spoke to me. He said, I will use you at the Grahamstown Arts Festival. And that was like oh yes, I remember, the real kind of trigger. I thought, well, how's this going to happen? Anyway, so I went off to, Brett and I got married at the end of that year. And in that year that I'd been in Cape Town, God really solidified things for me, because I had 6 months where I didn't have work, but I was committed to staying there. I was in our church was running a discipleship house, and I'd wanted to actually go to YWAM because they had ministry in Hawaii. And they'd asked me to go in the DTS and get involved with helping with their ministry. And I thought, well, I wasn't well enough known in my church to be able to be sent there. So they said to me, stay in a discipleship house for a year, and then build people that can support you financially to go. But I didn't end up going. In those first 6 months in the discipleship house, I had no work, and I tried a whole lot of different things. I'd done really well at UCT. I'd come top of my class at the dance and the teaching course, and I thought, I'm it. And then the Lord just, every dancing job that I got just didn't unfold. So I ended up waitressing and doing all sorts of things, but I did end up in Christlight. So that was God's purpose in that time. And eventually, hello, Judy. Eventually, in about the June, I was getting ready to go to a waitressing job, which I was useless at. And penny suddenly dropped in my heart, and it was so essential. God took everything away from me for me to get this in my heart, to say, my value does not depend on what I do, but who I am in him. And it was in my head, but it was never in my heart. And when I got that in my heart, the phone rang. And it was the education department in the Western Cape to say, oh, we've had a post with a dance teacher approved at a school in Eerste Rivier, and we want you to come for an interview. And we've known since January, but for some reason we haven't let the school know. And now the school have told us, and now we're phoning you. So God knew he had that place for me, but he put it on hold because it was more important for me to get that truth right and to know that he will look after me no matter what. And I think when I look back over these years, that's a foundational time where he taught that to me. So then, to just fast forward a bit, in the June, just after I got the job, I got engaged, and then I had to move 6 months later to Vanderbijl Park. And in Vanderbijl, I started my first dance studio called Joy Dance School. And at the time, I started a ministry group there and then. And that was hard ground because nobody was trained. And that was very difficult to work with. And I learned a lot and I made a lot of mistakes. And in that time that I was there, there was a scripture that God really highlighted for me: guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of your life. So that's where the spring part of DaySpring comes in. And then while we were there, Brett and I had some prophetic words, and they were just so on with being involved in dance. And there will be a new season that you will bring, a season of the King, and it will be a new spring.
Okay.
And then when I moved here after 3 years, my husband had a bursary, so he paid it off. And then he grew up in East London, and then we found a job for him here in East London. And in that interim time that I lived in Vanderbilt, that was where I met Judy, because I started doing some Fit for Praise and she was on a course. So that's our connection. Hi, Jude.
Hello.
If that is. And then after that, we came here and I got involved. I was teaching at the East London College. And at the East London College, there'd been a pupil, Catherine Daniels, who had Judy worked with when she lived in Pretoria. She left just before I joined there. And at that stage, Sally Sick was the head of the dance department at the college. And she and I had ended up in the same church, and they started a ministry called Arts Alive. Tim Salmon had come to our church, and he had come from Rhema, and he wanted to see that the arts growing. And that was a difficult time because I knew I had more history and experience in dance groups than Sally did. But Sally had seniority and she was my boss. And it was a very, very good character building time because sometimes she did things I thought, no, you don't do that in the dance ministry, but I couldn't really say it to her. And it was good, but hard. And so I was young, and at least for a while, I didn't think I knew everything, or at least I knew when to shut up, even if I thought I knew better. God just put his hand over me. And in fact, Georgie Brody came to me the one day, and she said to me, Katie, just because she knew, I don't know if you guys know Georgie Brody.
No,
okay, she's still alive. She's in her 80s. She lives in Cathcart, and she's amazing. Anyway, so at that time, I was there for 3 years, and then Sally fell ill, and she had a brain tumor. But in the time that we did Arts Alive, she gave me opportunities to do choreography and dance myself as well. And then she fell ill, and then she passed away. And that next year, I had just had my first child. And then the next year, I ended up helping teach in that dance department. And in that same, I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it all came together. But in that same year, a friend of mine, Diane Wilson, who was the Christian Dance Fellowship Coordinator at East London, started, we did a production called Dance of Life. And we did 3 productions together. And I ended up playing the role of the Holy Spirit. And it was a very interesting thing because we had no marketing. We had no way of getting people to come and watch. And we have a local magazine called The Go magazine. And I walked to my door, and I took it out the post box, and there was this huge picture of me on the front page. And I'm like, what? Who's this? But that picture brought a whole lot of people to come in and watch the production. And for a day or two, I kind of felt famous, you know. I went around town, do you know who I am? I was like, oh, come on, Katie, really? But it was God's purpose. And then in that, God birthed something in me. And in that month, the Lord just spoke to me very, very clearly. And he said to me, I want you to start a Christian dance studio and company again. And so that was in the year 2001. And so that started off, I went to Wendy, I was working at the time, and I said, I need to go out on my own. Rebecca was only a year old. I couldn't keep working the hours that I was, and I needed to follow the Lord and what that meant. So the next year I started Christian Dance Academy. And this is the faithfulness of God, because when I lived in Vanderbilt, I started a studio, and it was a difficult time. And after 3 years, I'd gone up to 40 pupils, and then I'd gone back to 20. And it was very, very hard ground. School were moving out of Vanderbilt Park at the time, and it was before the casino had been built. It was really under depression. Then when I started Christian Dance Academy, I started with 40 pupils. So it was like in this season, God just picked it up and said, go. And it was tricky because I'd be teaching the college. So there were some students that said, we want to go with what you're doing. And that was a lot to negotiate. I didn't want to start a Christian Dance Academy under poaching people. That also was a very kind of tricky situation to deal with. And Arts Alive continued in that time. Then there came a time where Arts Alive wasn't really, it's like God's grace lifted off me to do it anymore. And I handed it back to the church, and there was a big change in leadership at the church at the time as well. And they said, leave it with us. We'll see what happens with it. And then a year or two later, the Lord said, right, it's time to start DaySpring Dance Company. And he gave me the name, and now you know about the day with the dawn and the spring and the well of spring. And then I found this scripture in the Bible. And then incidentally, one of my students sent me a card. I don't know if you know about DaySpring Publishing Company. They're a Christian-based, their products are beautiful. It's an American version of Christian art. They've got the most beautiful things, yeah. And in between, in the time that I was at the college, I didn't tell you this, Judy and I had met, and she'd asked me to do some choreography. And so I did choreography on video and then sent it to her. And do you remember that, Judy?
Yeah, and then on God, and we didn't know that this was going to be our life in the future, doing everything via video.
I mean, that was 20 years ago.
I know.
I remember you saying to me, do you think this will work? Let's try it. Yeah. So there you go. Maybe that answers your question, Talita, about keeping up with things now. We already knew 20 years ago. No, I'm teasing. So then we started DaySpring. I auditioned intermediate and up students for it. And then God has just gone through many seasons with that company. So you were asking about the start. It's a long start, but that's how we started. Yeah.
I really appreciate the fact that you go into all of that detail, because I think a lot of us get a word from the Lord, and then we just see fast forward where your company is now, or where studios and people are around us now, and we don't hear about the hard yards and it gives a very unrealistic picture. So I relate so much to a lot of things that you've said. I also had glandular fever in matric when I had to write my matric exams. I don't know if that is a dance company person thing. And just hearing all of the elements that go into that. So yeah, it's very encouraging. Please also always tell the full story. I want to encourage people who are like generations from a different generation. I almost also want to tell my parents, please tell me the full story, because we only see the end product, and then it makes no sense when it's a struggle to get there. So no, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about the best part of DaySpring and of your studio, and some memories that you cherish.
I remember this was actually an Arts Alive moment, because we had an opportunity to do a Christmas production, and we were on the stage, and there was a piece of music that we were dancing to, and while we were dancing to it, there was a moment where the Lord said, I'm going to take my offering now. It was our final dress rehearsal. It was a Saturday night. We were doing it on the Sunday. And the Lord said, I'm going to take my offering now. And I thought, there's nothing unusual about this song. What's going on? And it was that song, Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down. That song, Here I am to say that you're my God, that one. I thought, okay. And at the end, we did a bow down all together. And we all just stayed there for about 20 minutes. There was such a strong sense of the presence of the Lord that it's one of those moments where I will remember for the rest of my life, because it seemed like, oh, we're just doing a rehearsal, and God said, I will do it. And then he did. And eventually the caretaker, I don't know if you've ever been to Christian Center Auditorium, but it's quite big. And it can seat, I think about over 1,200, somewhere around there. It's big by East London standards. And it's this huge place. And he was walking around dropping his keys because we weren't finishing, because it was just so silent. Like, why is someone dropping their keys? And then afterwards I realized it was 20 minutes that we were just sitting in the presence of the Lord. So for me, it was an amazing memory. The other things that we've done, we've gone to the Grahamstown Festival a few times. First we went under the what they call the Spirit Fest. They invited us and we did a workshop, and then we ministered in the Sunday service. They have a big cathedral service that they have, and those have been special times with the girls because we've gone away together, and it's looked different times. Sometimes we've just done a ministry piece. Then we did a production that we did at the cathedral. And I don't know if you even have been to the cathedral, but it's a good old-fashioned cathedral. And we did this dance, this piece called Just the Way You Are. And we didn't have huge audiences, but we had some that were there. So we needed to do that. And we had quick changes, and we didn't know how we were going to do them because it was the cathedral. And as we arrived to perform the first time, you know those banners, those pull-up banners that people use for advertising? There were 4, 2 on each side, wide enough for 2 people to hide behind. You could angle them and you could change. So the Lord was like, there you go, done it for you. You know, how's it going to work? And he just had. And his provision for those things, you know, you feel like you're crazy and loony for doing it in the first place. You feel like you're really going out there and you're thinking, is this my idea or is this really God breathed? Because that's what we do. We're constantly analyzing and checking. And then he does something like that and you think, okay, you really are in this. It's not just me imagining and hoping, you actually are in it. And then we've performed on the Sundowner Stage Theatre, which is in the auditorium, the main auditorium in Grahamstown. There's a fountain, and I don't know if you've ever been to that theatre, but there's a fountain in the center. And it's an atrium, and it's called the Sundowner big concert because the sun comes and goes down, and the sun rays as it's going down go onto the stage, and it's all free performances. So the people gather there at 5 o'clock, and then it's like a bun fight to see you can get to perform. But I recognized that as a platform that wasn't being used during the day. So we took an old piece that I'd done as a studio production called The Master Musician, and we've performed it there. And they had built a stage, but what I didn't realize was under the stage was this fountain. And this fountain was the scripture from John, I have come so that they can have life in abundance. And we were dancing on that. But now underneath that was an exhibition, you know, an installation that the special Standard Bank performers of the year, where they put an application in and they get money, and they're the main festival people. And this guy had done a thing about his origins in the cradle of mankind. Mm-hmm. And it was completely the opposite of what our creation story is. And there was big controversy because there we were dancing on top of what he was trying to do in the bowels of the building. And then we got into trouble because we were changing where the access was. There was confusion because we were the first ones who'd used that venue as a daily thing. There was an issue, and it caused a lot of trouble because we were there, but there was the light and the dark fighting with each other about it. And then we had somebody who in the middle of one of the directors of the theatre, in the middle of one of our performances, where we had 1,000,001 quick changes because you never have enough dancers, and he came in and he was taking photographs of us changing. And then one of the girls got highly upset that he was taking photographs. Look at Judy's face. But he was gay. So we didn't know that. It was about evidence of what we were doing, you know. And we had stood that side because the other side was the fire hydrant. And we thought, well, we mustn't be in front of the fire hydrant. We had a little pergola. We had a gazebo that we put up every time with sides. So we had somewhere to change because it was in the middle of a foyer. And so there are all these kind of things where God just then shapes you, and then you have to deal with those who have an attitude, because now that girl picked up an attitude, and then I had to deal with it. She had an attitude the rest of the time she was there. And so then God reminded me, but even within the disciples, there was a Judas, there was someone who had another ulterior motive. And that was quite hard to deal with, but good, because it makes you realize you can't expect everybody to be perfect and be completely in line with the vision of what you're doing, because they're not going to be. But if God calls them in that season, he's going to use them in that season in your group. And that was a hard one, but a good one. And then last year, we decided to do Issue of Blood. And we also, this time we went on to I had taken a studio production, Fly Eagle Fire, as part of the Fringe. And this was now a paying one. So I knew what the venue was like, and we used the same venue, but I just took Issue of Blood. And it was amazing. God gave us free accommodation, which in itself is just up the road, just about a 20-30 minute drive. There were friends of one of the girls who's in DaySpring who had a guest farm where they trained missionaries. And so they had all these beds and rooms. And then her granny did all our food for us. Mm-hmm. the growth in the girls, the growth in the dancers themselves was amazing. And then the people who came to watch, we didn't have full audiences, but not many, even things got Ovation Awards didn't get full audiences, because it's almost like the festival's too full, there are too many items. Anyway, and just the growth in the girls and seeing them wash dishes together and have quiet times together and really living together for a few days and tolerating each other. And learning how to be understanding, even if you had someone who's up till 3 o'clock in the morning who can't sleep, or someone else who's noisy, or someone who's messy, or all of that was really good. And then this is the very amazing story. So we'd done it there. Then we had performances in East London. A week before the performance in East London, I got a spider bite, and I ended up in hospital. And I was the narrator. And as I was sitting in hospital 3 days before the performance, I went through the other people that could possibly take my role. The one I thought of popped into the hospital herself because her daughter had fallen out of a window and broken her arm. The other one was my sister, who then got a throat infection. And I can't remember who the third one was. I said, okay, well, Lord, if you want the performance to happen, then, I got out of hospital on the morning of the performance that evening. And God was so good, because I just sat in a chair instead of standing up for my narration. And Andrea and Amy, we'd done the production. And my daughter Rebecca had been calling the cues of the lighting cues and things. And we had a video of what we'd done in Grahamstown. So the day before, they'd gone in, they'd done the setup, they'd done the rehearsal. I mean, Andrea has done it a million times. So, I mean, she has been really a wonderful, wonderful support. And DaySpring wouldn't be where it wasn't if she hadn't joined us in the last 3 years. And she and Amy Amy was my intern last year for DaySpring. It was the first time we'd had a full intern. And I walked in and we performed. And it was so sweet and so tender, because Issue of Blood is about women's stories. So it's based on the story, The Red Tent. I don't know if you know The Red Tent, but in the old days, in the Old Testament, when the women were having their period, they would sit in the red tent and they would sit on the straw. And I just took that aspect and all the different stories that women would have told each other when they sit on the straw, and about their life stories. And then took some biblical characters, and then also took some modern day stories. And just explored those stories. And we planning on doing it again post-COVID, and adding some more, because when you dance in Grahamstown, you only have an hour. So you can't do all the aspects. So there's some that we might take away and some add as we go along. So it can be an eternal production, because as things come up, we can change it as we go along. But the sweetness of really being at the complete mercy of God when doing that performance. And then there was a song I was going to sing. Now, was I going to sing it? Was I going to use the recording? Was I going to lip sync? Were we going to leave it out completely? It was just really living on the edge of what the Lord allowed. And the girls loved it, because they danced for their home audience. And the women who watched it afterwards, and even the men who came, were just so touched. And they were asking, do you have a video? Can you do it again? So we plan to do it for Mother's Day this year, and then the next weekend as well. But obviously with lockdown, we didn't get to do that. And then when that intern said to me at the end of the year, she's going away to study, I just thought, well, I don't see how I can sustain DaySpring. I don't see, at the end of last year, I said, Lord, okay, is this the end of the season now? I thought I was building, and now the one person who was an intern was then possibly going to become more full-time, and then maybe add another one and just build bit by bit. And I didn't know what to do. But then we took in a whole new group of Issue of Blood, apprentices, to start learning work, because they had now done the exam and got to a certain level, and they were very keen. But it was that whole thing of dropping again down to a level. We lost 2 key dancers at the end of the year, and that was frustrating. But then we started getting going, and then COVID hit. And then my last little fleece was that application that I put in with the arts and culture department, sports recreation. And then we heard last week that we've been given some money to be able to do the Issue of Blood performances again, and possibly take it on a bit of a tour if we have people who want to host us, or film it better, because we did film it, but we didn't, just from a performance that we had the film, not a close-ups and faraways and all of those. So that's a little bit of what we've done.
Okay, if you could tell us about like what has been two of the hardest things? I know it's difficult to choose two, but like two of the hardest challenges that you have had to overcome as a company.
Not knowing what it looks like or where it's going. And I think one of the reasons why is because of COVID. I think if I had started, because my second child finishes matric this year. And so I have been putting on pause and holding back the reins for the sake of my family and children for a long time. When I talked about the prophetic words that we had then, one of the prophetic words is that I will go places and be invited, and as a visitor I will be invited again, and I must believe for airfares and da-da-da. That hasn't been happening for years and years. And so I've had to lay it down over and over and over again and saying, well, Lord, if it's yours, it will come. It will come. And so sowing the time into my family and choosing to only do it at this level, and then seeing that it's going to come, and then having what I thought it was going to grow into setback. But I know this now, that if we had tried to sustain a more full-time employed company in the last year, it would have fizzled. It wouldn't, because I haven't done anything with DaySpring in the last few months because of trying to keep the studio going, because that's the bread and butter of what I do. And so looking back at it, I had 2 teachers resign last year as well, which was also, they had various reasons. One was needing to move, the other's possibly going to Australia. Her husband's Australian, and she didn't know when she was going. So she didn't want to commit herself this year, because I would never have been able to have paid them this year with less income coming in. But I've had this huge teaching load. So I'm like, well, how do I do this teaching load and run DaySpring? I've been trying to train teachers to take the dance academy going, and so that I can focus on this, but I can't focus on that because the dance academy still needs my attention. So it's that pull and push of when, how, Lord, what? I thought I had this vision, and I think that's been the frustrating part. Yeah.
And I think as a last question, I want to know, when has the ministry productions been the most powerful or impacting? What factors do you think contribute to this?
Authenticity. I think if you're authentic on stage, and if you're prepared to be vulnerable and tell the real story, I have come to realize that professional isn't enough. Professional is an excuse to think you're not good enough to do it, and to say, well, that's not professional enough, I'm not doing it. If you look at what's happened with Zoom classes and teaching ballet lessons, that we have to muddle along. Andrea used that expression the one day. She said, well, we'll just muddle along. I'm like, okay, let's muddle along. To think that we've got to do it beautifully before we can put it up there is not actually going to take you to where you want to be. The only way you get better at doing is by doing it. You have to just put yourself out there. And so that is, I think, the artist's biggest struggle, is that you're constantly putting yourself out there. And we look at the wrong things to measure that. But when someone turns around and says, sure, okay, that really touched me, that's a blessing that we get to know that. But we don't always get to know that. And to go back to the Lord and to say, okay, Lord, have I done what you called me to? I had a bit of a breakthrough then when the Lord took me to the scripture in Isaiah, where Isaiah says to him, Lord, he says, Isaiah, I'm calling you. And Isaiah says, but I'm a man of unclean lips, Lord. Why would you use me? And then God sends an angel with a coal, and he puts it on his lips, and he says, now I have purified your mouth. Your lips are now clean, and you will speak on my behalf. I have a mission for you. I have something that you must go and tell the people. And they will not listen, you will fail. And when God, really, 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 Lord, and that's the thing. Now, when we know that Christ is Christ, because which scriptures do we use to confirm who Christ was? Scriptures in Isaiah. Years and years and centuries later, what Isaiah planted then, because of his obedience, God used to tell the world who Christ was and to confirm who Christ was. But he didn't see that. Who wants to go on a mission that you know you're going to fail at?
And it's the same with Jeremiah. It's the came, he told them you're going to need to bring this message and the people are not going to want to hear it at all. Yeah.
But there were people who heard it. There were in that time. But in general, the people said, oh, you're rubbish. And you know, basically threw rocks at him. And yet he still went back to the Lord. And so I think the constant going back to God and asking him, Lord, what is your perfect and pleasing will? Full stop. Help my heart to be in line with that.
Judy, we spoke about this yesterday. Welcome to the to the very intimate conversation. But yes, we had exactly.
Just telling Talita, like, I feel like I've failed at my entire life. I've failed at 2 marriages. I've failed at 2 dance companies. I've failed at trying to start studios. I've just failed at everything. So that gives me hope.
Yeah.
But you've got to look at how you define failure.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, that's exactly the thing. It's, you know, we were talking about it yesterday, and you can learn from other people's mistakes, but I'm very encouraged by what you say, because when I look back at my life, all I see is complete failure. And then it's not my business what God does with that. I just know that even in that, I have been faithful to do what he called me to do.
Yeah.
But that is the end thing.
Yeah, and there's cycles in life. There's cycles. And that has been one of the signature dances that we've done over and over again, is a song by Nicole Nordeman called Seasons. I don't know if you've ever listened to it, but she's an amazing poet. If you just read the lyrics of her songs, they are amazing. And it talks about how we live in different seasons. And this is this is the one point of, isn't a DaySpring story, but it is a dance ministry story. When I started Christian Dance Academy, there was a group of girls, 4 girls that started a dance group called Living Stones. And they were girls that I had trained at the college and had a season of teaching. And then when I did my first production, I didn't have seniors, so I asked them to come and dance. And they did the seasons dance for me in it. And then I was giving them regular class. So this was definitely something that just petered out, because as we were doing the class one day, Giselle didn't arrive. Her name's Giselle. You'll see the irony now. She was engaged. She was going to get married, and she was driving to rehearsal, and she died in a car accident. And we just wondered where she was. And then we found out, and it was actually on my son's first birthday on the 4th of November. And it was devastating, particularly for those girls. It was devastating. And in the seasons dance, it goes summer, autumn, winter, spring. And one of my students, well, by then she was a dancer and then taught with me, Adele, she did winter. And the lines in winter are, winter opens doors for life to enter. And in the choreography, Giselle was spring, and she ran in and did this big leap of life coming in after winter. And life so often is echoed in art, or art so often echoes life. And it was prophetic for her because she went into new life, but it was devastating for her fiance and for the girls around. And so that was something that DaySpring has now continued with that dance, and we've done it in various, it's one of our evergreen pieces that we do a lot. And to just know that's, yeah, it isn't predictable. And her name was Giselle. I mean, at the time I thought, I can't believe this. And her mom was actually a ballet teacher as well. But she wasn't teaching anymore. But she had a whole life full of devastation. The Lord said, come be with me. You've had enough. You've had enough. Come be with me. I'll look after those others that are left behind. I love them too. But it was just, that was the other hard moment was just, but that group was called Living Stones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I'm gonna just give Tienie, because she has prepared something for us, and I want to ask you to add, to bring depth, or to add if there's anything that she says that relates. But so Tienie is going to facilitate just a little bit on what Katie also spoke about running a dance ministry at a church. It looks a little bit different than having a dance ministry at a studio, because you work with a different demographic or a different
Yep.
So Tienie, I'm going to hand over to you now. And I think we have a little broader base listening to this as well. So I do think it's important.
Wow. So, Katie, thank you so much. I think I could listen for another couple of hours to your stories and your wisdom. And I think it's just so amazing to hear the way that art can really just open up such a new way of thinking and such new opportunities to really share more about who he is and what his heart is. And I think essentially what I'm going to be chatting about is just some practical ideas and, you know, on tips on, you know, if you feel God is calling you to start a ministry, whether it be dance ministry or arts ministry or songwriting ministry, yeah, just some practical tips on that. But yeah, so the idea is not to give you like a recipe set in stone, because as we've heard now, also life goes on different journeys and it goes through cycles. Sometimes we have 2 at the dance ministry, sometimes we are 20 in the dance ministry, so it goes through cycles as well. Yeah, just really also sharing a bit about some structure, but also then the heart behind dance ministry. So firstly, why I'm so passionate about dance ministry. So like Talita said, I've been part of the Doxa Deo dance ministry since she's been there, so for the past 6 years. And I think the reason why it's so close to my heart is just because I've always loved dancing. I've loved ballet and tap and modern and all the things in between that we try. And it's really just opened a door for me in a way that I experience God and the way that I get to also worship Him. And I love singing and I love reading and I love, you know, just sitting in His presence in quietness. But there's something really special about dancing where I get to use my talent just to glorify Him. And so that's why the dance ministry is really so close to my heart. And another reason is because of some of these ladies, and so the faces have changed over the years, but it goes from everything from serving together and dancing in a mall, you know, serving others, and it goes from here we were having just like we're like, okay, we should have an art social, let's paint, and Debbie was teaching us how to use Copic markers and we're doing watercolor painting and yeah, having fun, and also yeah, just getting to know each other, building community, and having fun and rehearsing together. And but I think behind all of this is the reason why I think it's worked is because of the fact that our hearts are aligned. So apart from the fact that we all love dancing, I think the fact that we all really do it just to glorify Him kind of is like the little glue that makes it work. So yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about it. And yeah, just about my experience, I am by no means a professional dancer. I am currently busy with my Advanced 2 RID, but I am very far from ever doing that exam. But I think I really have a love for dance. So I'm by no means supple or professional or technically exceptional, but I really just love it. And, you know, when I started with dance ministry 6 years ago, you really, you know, there's a big difference between performance and ministry, and you kind of, you know, at performance you can still kind of put a bit of a shield up between you and the audience, where with dance ministry you really open that up to be vulnerable and to really express emotion and allow the Holy Spirit to move through you. So I remember being very confronted when starting with dance ministry, because all of a sudden you can't hide behind the technique and the, you know, the little structures and so on anymore. So, you know, it's a really also for me personally been a journey of growing in confidence. So last week, Michelle, or 2 weeks ago, Michelle also shared her testimony on her first time doing free worship on stage and how daunting that was. But yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest victories is growing out of this feeling of inadequacy, because I remember I was probably a year or 2 into the dance ministry, and the one time afterwards I was thinking, why am I always standing at the back? I feel like I'm always at the back, you know? And then I was like, where is this little voice coming from? And that whole realization about, firstly, this is not about me. Firstly, this is about serving Him and glorifying Him, and really kind of just having to go through that process of getting over myself. But really, yeah, just on back to discover the heart behind why we do what we do, and the dance ministry, and the blessing it is in serving through dance ministry. And then mostly also it's just really fun. It's just really fun to spend time with a group of girls that have a similar heart and a similar interest. So yeah, so okay, so I'm just going to jump into a few practical points, and I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. But Salita and Katie, if you've got any other inputs, feel free to jump in. Okay, so structure. So the idea of this is, the purpose is not to give you the step-by-step. It's just kind of to give you an idea on how to facilitate the dance ministry in a way that we can minister more effectively as a group. So having structures in place just kind of helps with that. And I think I have to give Talita credit on this one. I think it's something that you did very well, is to create that structure in the dance ministry that carries on even now that you are not dancing with us anymore on a regular basis. And I think structure, a lot of times it has a negative stigma, especially if we talk about arts ministry and so on, because it feels like you're restricting freedom and taking away creativity. But if you have met me, or you would know that I'm a big cheerleader of structure. I think it's the way that my DNA has been put together. I love organizing and I think like an engineer. But I think what for me for structure is the way that it kind of just sets the boundaries within which we can move freely. So I think for me, that is just the heartbeat behind structure. And this is just what has worked for us at the Doxa Deo Dance Ministry. So feel free to take what works for you and leave out all the others. But yes, so the first thing is having a set time. So having a set time where you get together every week. So we meet on a Thursday evening from 6:30 until 8:30. Now, obviously, that's not going to work for everyone. If it's a group of young mums dancing together, or if it's the more advanced in life, just kind of enjoying dancing together, doing free worship together, and so on. So it's also going to vary, but just have a time that works for everyone. And just for me, the reason behind this is, if you have a rhythm, it avoids confusion and it encourages connectedness. Because if you have the discipline, and when I say avoid confusion, if you say, okay, we meet once every month or once every 3 weeks, it's like, oh, I don't know if it's this week or next week, so I'm just going to leave it, and having that set rhythm really just creates that discipline. Even if you're not busy preparing a dance, still taking that time and kind of investing in each other and praying about the dance ministry and about the upcoming dances and so on, because for that connectedness part of it, it's very important to build the relationships and the trust within the dance ministry, so that we can function in unity and so that we can minister in unity. All right. Then the next one is outward focus. So, the dance ministry can be in any form. It can be a group of friends with you who all love dancing, and you just decide you want to start a dance ministry and you want to just dance to glorify him together. It can be in the form of what Katie and them are doing, where the outflow is from a studio. And then what we do is we are doing it, let's say, under the cover of the church of Doxa Deo. But whatever the format of it is, as long as the purpose of it is really is just to share his heart, to minister to others. And as much as it is an amazing experience for ourselves and really learning something about his character or experiencing just his overwhelming presence, at the heart of what we do, I feel that the purpose is still to have an outward focus and to bless others through our movement. So yes, it's also like Katie mentioned, I think, before we started the Zoom session, is we are all part of the body. And this is just a way that I feel as part of the body that we also get to serve. And it's such a privilege to be able to serve with your talents. So that is for me just the other core thing in terms of structure, is just to keep the focus on making sure that you're serving as well. So it's awesome to have a dance ministry and you kind of dance together and have fun and so on. But at the end of the day, it still needs to be to glorify him.
I just want to add there just something. I think why you also mention it is because it is usually it's a lot of girls. I think now the ministry has a guy, hey, Praise the
Yes.
Lord for that.
Yes.
But it can become a little holy huddle, like, oh, we all love each other and we dance together and we do things that we love, and the culture becomes like everyone. But it's different to a dance class. So you don't go there to receive community and just a place to live out your passion. It is that, but what makes ministry different is ministry means service. Ministry in the Greek, the word means to serve. And so constantly in the midst of community, and because relationships do form, and it does become a comfortable place, it should become a place where people get accepted and they can be themselves. But it isn't a place like a dance class where it's for your own benefit. And so people need to understand that it is a place where God called me to, and I'm serving out of a place of calling, and that requires commitment, dedication, and often sacrifice as well. And I think, yeah, that's just something, when you start it and when you are busy with it, the focus can easily turn inward. No, we're comfortable with this. No, we need this. No, we want to do this. And it's up to the leader to constantly remind everyone that why are we doing this? Like, what is it for? It is a sacrifice. If you want a place to just dance, go join a dance class, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. Okay, then I'm going to go over to the next one, which is planning. Okay, so just as a last, maybe connecting thought between the outward focus and us dancing as part of the church, just on a practical point, what usually helps is if you have a set liaison, so you have someone on the dance ministry side communicating to a person on the church's side to make sure that you kind of don't get lost in translation on what the expectation is, or dates that you need to be dancing, or what song you need to be dancing to, or so on. So it just kind of helps to have that person in place. So it could be in your church, it could be the pastor, it could be the person leading the worship team. In our case, we have someone who looks after arts ministry in Doxa Deo, so she's our liaison, but just to have that in place. And maybe just something on a personal note that's quite nice is oftentimes they give us a theme. So for example, they are busy with a series now on Fruit of the Spirit, and so the song they gave us is on joy. So now we get to kind of just emphasize the message based on the theme that the church's this church series is on. But yeah, the reason why it's important to get those dates and times in place is just because if you can plan ahead of time, you kind of avoid that crunch time at the end. And the idea of it is to take all of the stresses out of the system so that you can just focus on the ministry. And that's probably my industrial engineering slang creeping in there. But yeah, the idea of it is just what we usually do is we have like a grid where you mark, okay, these are the dates, and then you have the people commit to dates. And the idea is everyone's life goes through seasons. You can't always commit to something. That's okay. But the moment that you've committed, and like Talita has also said, it is a time sacrifice that you do to become part of a ministry. But the moment that you've committed, there's kind of also this unspoken rule that, okay, you're going to try your best to then be at all of the rehearsals and to be then at the day of the performance. Because like I said, you want to avoid the last minute crises of changing choreography and changing spacing and everyone feeling overwhelmed. And all of a sudden the focus shifts from looking at we're ministering to panic mode, and everyone's like, this is so stressful, I don't want to do this again, and so on. But yes, so just as a practical example, we like to have at least 4 weeks lead time, at least 3 weeks to learn new choreography and 1 week to do polishing. But ideally, the longer it is, the more time we can really spend about praying about the dance, praying about the choreography, and making sure that the intent of what we are ministering is really true to what he has called us to minister. So the longer the time, the more relaxed it is. But just to keep in mind that if you have a timeline that you're working according to, it helps to take a lot of the stress out of the system and keeps the focus on what we're really doing. Okay, and then just as a side note, why we have rehearsals and why we practice over and over. Why can't we just ask the Holy Spirit to guide us and go on stage and, just do our thing? And I know it's a conversation that's also come up a lot of times, especially when the platform that we dancing is not out of a studio where there's already kind of like a level of excellence. But the reason we aim for excellence is I feel that, it's kind of a way that we serve him. We don't want to serve our God, just with a mediocre. You want to serve it to the best of your ability. So I'm not saying everyone needs to be an advanced dancer, but you need to serve him up to the best of your ability. In Colossians 3, he says, and it's so nice in the Amplified Translation, Colossians 3:23, whatever you do and whatever your task may be, work from the soul that is put in your very best effort as something done for the Lord and not for men. Because at the end of the day, it's not just doing it for him in excellence because we want to look good, because that's performance, that's not ministry. It's because of the fact that we want the people to be focusing on the message and not like, oh my word, that girl is completely on her own counts. So, you want to have the focus of everything we do to minister the message most effectively. And that is why we rehearse, why we run it over and over, and why we aim for excellence. Okay, so on that, roles and responsibilities, perhaps when I speak on excellence, what comes to mind is Talita drilling us to do Reckless Love for the umpteenth time, even though we are all like so tired. But the reason for that is just you need to have someone in the dance ministry that's going to drive it, to make sure that we are on track, to call a spade, and to make sure that we stay on course. And oftentimes this is the person that leads the group, but it could be one of the others in the team as well. As you mentioned earlier, Katie, it's not just one person that needs to take the responsibility of making this thing work. It's the whole team that needs to work together. And so often what I would suggest is that most companies, it works best if you have kind of one person heading it up and taking responsibility. And the reason for that is, like Talita said, there needs to be a check to make sure, is the heart behind what we're doing still correct? Are we still making sure that we are outwardly focused? And are we making sure that we are ministering in unity to the people around us? So that is just I think the main reason for having a dedicated person just to take the leadership in a dance ministry. But as I said, the leader is not the person who does everything. Organically with time, as you go start a dance ministry and you spend time together, you get to learn each other's strengths and know what everyone is best at. And they will kind of automatically pick up that part if you ask them to. So it can be anything from making sure we are polished. So we have a girl that is very set on detail, and she will kind of take up that, I want to say, that task of saying, okay, we've had fun, but we're not going to stop now. Let's keep going. Let's make sure that we are polished. We have Debbie, who is here, who is like technologically up to it. So I cannot do what she does, and she makes sure all of our videos are backed up, our files are in storage. If we ever need to refer back to that, we can do that. And like for me, I'm the extrovert, so I love organizing the socials and making sure we celebrate the birthdays. But again, all of that is secondary to what we do as the dance ministry. So I think just as a summary or a conclusion of this is, the main thing here is just to make sure that everyone in the team adheres to the vision of the dance ministry, which is reaching the others, ministering his heart.
I also think that handing up roles or to diversifying the roles obviously takes a strain off the leader, but it makes everyone that's part. So you mentioned, okay, someone in their personality is more detailed, or someone this frustrates them, or then to utilize the strengths of that group and the unique abilities of the group also makes them show up more, and it makes them it gives them buy-in, and it gives them a sense of significance in the team. So if I'm not there, then the costuming is not going to happen. If I'm not there, then we're not going to have the social aspect. So to look at the whole the whole group's functioning and see, okay, this is a role, this is something that needs to happen, and to allocate. I almost want to challenge you, if you are starting this, give people responsibility, because it gives them buy-in. It also makes them it makes them feel like I belong here, I'm needed, and it changes the whole, it makes people feel welcome. It changes the whole dynamic of how it functions as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very well said. Absolutely. Then just on a last practical point on choreography. So I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. Michelle's last session on choreography was so much fun. If you missed it, go and have a look at the YouTube video. But she's just given a couple of creative ideas that we don't get stuck in the rut and do the same 3 ballet moves over and over when doing our choreography. But with regards to this, I'm just going to mention practically how we do it. So either the church is going to ask us to do free worship, in which case, you know, we're going to need some volunteers, and who feels that the Lord is calling them, yeah, to step out into that boldness to do free worship. And then the other way that we would do it is, initially, if you start a dance ministry, you might be the only person choreographing, because it is a vulnerable place to choreograph, and you are putting yourself up there to receive critique even. I remember when I started, Talita had to take on a lot of the burden of doing the choreography for the first couple of dances, because again, it takes time to build that confidence in the group and the safe space in the group for someone to step up and volunteer to say, okay, I feel that the Lord is calling me to choreograph this song because it's really a theme that I'm passionate about, or that the Lord has journeyed with me with. So it could also then be later with time that you would have one person stepping up to the plate to choreograph a dance. And what we've been doing recently is a group effort. So we would have 2 or 3 people choreographing a dance. So you would have one person taking the chorus and the bridge, and the other people taking verses, which is a lot of fun. The only challenging part of this is if everyone has a slightly different style, it takes a little bit more time to put it together, because you need to make sure that it flows into each other nicely. So that would be something that also works a bit better if you have a little bit more time to put it together. But it also works quite well for us to work out the choreography in advance at home, and then come together and put all the different parts together. But it's also fun to, if you have the time, work out the choreography together as a group. Yes, just to get, maybe perhaps initially as well, to get the people involved, to feel that they're also part of the dance, that it's not someone teaching choreography to you and you're just performing their choreography, but really to feel that they have kind of absorbed the dance and then dancing it out. Okay, and then just lastly, I'm going to keep it brief because I know we're slightly over time, but the make or break of a dance ministry is really just the culture and community behind it. You know, you can have all the perfect structures in place, and but essentially it needs to be a safe space for everyone who's part of the dance ministry, and the focus really needs to be on him. And the main tool for that is just to make sure that prayer is basically the ground that you work from with everything you do. When you start a new dance, to really ask him to guide the choreography, yes, to come and fill us with the Holy Spirit, to touch the atmosphere that we are dancing with him. And we end off in every rehearsal also with prayer and just thanking him for the absolute privilege of serving him and dancing with him. So at the end of the day, you can have the perfect crew with all of the technique, you can have the perfect structures, but if the heart behind it is lacking, then the ministry is not going to be as effective. And again, like Talita said, it is a time commitment, but you kind of inspire that commitment because often the people that will volunteer to become part of the dance ministry already has a passion for it. So you might not have to like really work hard to make them come, but you know, some might say they come because it's worship time for them, or it's exercise, or some of the group, girls, even 2 weeks ago, we talk about it being kind of like a cell group, because we share our highs and lows there, we encourage each other, we affirm each other, and yeah, we really get to know each other and get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, because if we do that, it means we are more in sync and more in unity. And as with all groups, there might be conflict, but it means that either we can avoid it or we can resolve it quicker. Because if we really understand that person and where they are coming from, it helps to make sure that the purpose behind what we're doing remains core, and not all the other little things that try and steal away from that. So yes, I think the other thing for me, why it's easy for me to commit to it, is because I have FOMO, so I don't want to miss out anything. But it's also just a space, you know, where you can just like let it out all before him. You know, the other evening, like I said, you know, we were all tired and we were dancing to joy. And, you know, by the end of that session, you're like, wow, I have all of this stuff going on in my life. But if at the end of the day, I can choose to believe his truth, where he's given me joy. And with that, I don't mean happiness. I'm happy all the time. I mean the inner joy that he gives me. And to really share those truths with each other. You know, what does this dance mean to me? What do I experience when I'm worshiping him? And how do we share that with others when we are dancing? Yeah, so at the end of it, if I just conclude, I'm gonna leave out a couple of things, but all the practical things can be in place. But the most important of all of it is just to make sure that the heart behind it is solid and that we put him first. So yeah, I want to encourage you, if you feel that God is calling you to start a dance ministry, or like I said, a singing ministry or songwriting ministry, whatever it might be, just take the small leap of faith. It's all not going to be smooth sailing all the way, and it might not be a group of 10 people, you know, it will vary and it will go through seasons. But yeah, just to follow in his obedience, and just do whatever you do to the glory of him. And that's it from me.
Thank you, teens. Katie, I don't know if you will agree with me, but what I love about dance ministry, or creating a dance ministry community, is just the healing that it brings and the ministry it brings to the dancers that are involved. Like, yeah. I think it does minister to others and it gives them purpose. But like over the years, I've seen the healing and the growth and the spiritual maturity that is formed in the group, if it's done well. I think that's where the glory and the wonder of it lies. And so that's why I think even in a studio culture, to have that same principles, or to work towards that same way of functioning, I think that honors the King. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Katie. Thank you.
3 things.
Yes.
Okay, the first thing is just on what you were saying. Issue of Blood, I talked about the fact that it was talking about women's issues. Within our group, we had one of the girls who hadn't had her period for about 2 years. And it wasn't because she had an eating disorder. She'd actually gone to it was a whole, they didn't know what the story was, but they were working on it. And prophetically, part of the thing about talking about the issue of blood, when the woman came into the tent, is there were obviously some who came for the first time, and there was a bit of a celebration of it. And so I actually made her the girl who came in to make, you know, as if, and a few months later, her period just started. Wow. And it was really the Lord just kind of, he said to me, I want you to make this girl this role. She's the one, you're welcome to what we call the blood club. And then they did a little skit on Dear Future Husband, the Meghan Trainor song, but a slightly different version of it. And so he does bring that healing. So the 2 things that has happened, that Andrea obviously has brought some aspects into it. And the one thing is, I always used to do the devotional, and that used to be quite a heavy thing for me. And she said to me, but why don't you just let each girl get a turn? And then when Amy was intern, she sorted out and said, okay, each person, and she said, and she reminded them, this is the list, you're on this day, they're on this day. And the girls have bought some really beautiful things. And it's amazing how it's forced them to get into the word, because these are teenagers. So there's a lot competing for their attention. But the other resource that I've used a lot is a book called The Heart of the Artist. And then it's Willow Creek Church. They've done a lot of work. So it's called The Heart of the Artist. And then there's another one called The Thriving Artist. And it's about dealing with character of the artists in particular. And it's a very, very good ministry tool. And the other thing that we've done, which is a good thing to do, is we have a share in a house in Katberg, which is about 2 hours drive away from us. And for 2 years now, we've been able to do a weekend away. And that has been amazing. And then we have just been able to, we managed to work through the heart of the artist. And then last year, my daughter did an amazing race. Now they're hills like this. And so we had to go up and down the hills doing things like shooting with a paintball gun and playing tennis. I mean, ballet dancers, ball skills. Only one in the team had ball skills. And so it was just really good for team building. So to take that time away and working with teenagers is you're dealing with a slightly different level because you've got younger and older, but you're dealing with girls that are maybe 14 or 15, and then you're dealing with girls in their 20s. And there's a lovely teaching of the older and the younger going on, but also there's a lot of influence you have. They are dealing and negotiating with things that we didn't have to negotiate with growing up in social media and all sorts of things. And it's quite a formation time to work out, okay, well, if you're going to post photos of yourself in a high-cut bikini and be on DaySpring, how do those fit together? But be gracious towards them because they're doing it anyway. And how do you handle it? And still I'm working on how to handle that with some of them. And so getting them to trust you and to know, because also I'm their ballet teacher, some of them. So it's a very difficult kind of, when am I Auntie Katie ballet teacher and when am I DaySpring dance director, which is much more one-on-one and a more level playing field than it is when I'm in the dance studio telling them exactly what they're doing wrong all the time. So it's a fine balance. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Does anyone want to add to the discussion? I think it covered most of the bases. If someone wants to start or wants to have a view into what it's like, I think this gave them that. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Katie, for coming all the way from East London.
Well, just invite me. Well, actually, remember I talked about that word saying as a visitor, you'll be invited. Well, I thought, oh, this is one of those, because I was a visitor first and now I've been invited and it didn't take an airfare, which is great. No. But yeah, I just want to say that sometimes when we have a vision and an idea, we have a way of thinking that God is going to work it out because we're creative people. So you have this vision and you think, okay, that's what it's going to look like. And this is a story that the Lord, I told someone last week, actually, when I was having a struggle and the studio was new and DaySpring was new, I had this weird dream. And in this dream, I had a baby, but the baby was a Barbie. I gave birth to this perfect little Barbie and it had blonde hair, blue eyes, it had a nice little figure and it was perfectly put together. And then I had another baby and it was a baby. And I was like, Lord, what is this about? And then I sat here discussing it with the lady who works with me in the office, who's got a lot of wisdom. And as I was talking to her, it's like God gave me the understanding of it. And it says, you don't give birth to Barbies. Oh. You give birth to messy babies. You give birth to babies who need their nappies changed, who need to be fed every 4 hours, and they develop and they grow.
I think
and
that's
if you want a Barbie, it's going to be a little
story.
Barbie, and it's never going to be walk, and it's never going to be able to talk, and it's never going to be able to develop and grow and dance and do all those things. And so that was like, okay, I don't like this baby very much at the moment. But to know that because that had to be there for what was going to come from it. So I feel like I'm in the toddler stage now.
I think my expectation was giving birth to a Barbie in real life. I think so. That's why it was so hard for me to become a mom. But anyway.
But because we're so used to being in control.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. You must have a wonderful Saturday, and we'll see you again. I'm wondering if we are going to move next week or the next day because it's over a long weekend. So I'm thinking that might not be the best idea. So I will get back to you on the next date. But thank you very much for showing up and for sharing this with us. Bye.
Thanks for having us. Well done, Lisa.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.